Okay, I welcome you to another episode of Learning Stories. This is an audio and video show where we interview a diverse set of learners from the 21st century. On each episode of this show, we interview a guest who has a story to share about how they acquired a set of skills and knowledge in a creative and innovative manner. In the process, we hope to uncover a new understanding of learning as conceptualized, imagined, and narrated by the guest on our show. Today's guest, Neha Garg, is one of my favorite podcasters. A little bit about Neha before we jump into this conversation. Neha Garg is a communication strategist, podcast host, and founder of several heartfelt initiatives that blend purpose with creativity and care. With a strong background in advocacy, sustainability, and storytelling, she brings a deeply personal and grounded approach to everything she does, whether it's leading meaningful conversations on her podcast, Parenthood with Neha, building brand and communication units for the impact sector organizations through her consulting services, or coaching professionals to align their work and identity through her leadership programs. Neha's work is shaped by her belief in slow living, fairness, and emotional honesty. A mother to a spirited toddler and four beloved rescue dogs, she lives in Faridabad and finds her rhythm in composting, growing her own food, writing, and dreaming up kinder systems. At her core, Neha is always seeking joy in the everyday and meaning in the mess, while helping others to do the same. So, after that wonderful introduction, there's a lot of pressure to make this podcast good. But Neha is a podcaster herself, and I'm very excited for this. But Neha, thank you for making time for this.
My pleasure, Abhishek. Thank you for thinking of me and inviting me here. I'm just truly honored.
Yeah, and this is the first time it's happening to me. I think I've not had another podcaster on the podcast, so I'm really excited about this conversation. But I'm excited also because I've been a listener of Parenthood with Neha, and as someone in my early 30s grappling with that question, I think your podcast gave me a lot of clarity and understanding about what it means to be a parent. Not
Yeah,
just the exciting, but also the messy, difficult part of it. And the way you are able to capture those stories, not just through your podcast, but I got a chance to look at some of your brand consulting work, and I see this rawness, this honesty, and this power of using communication to touch people,
yeah.
come through in your stories. But
Thank you.
the reason I wanted to talk to you, Neha, is I whenever I start the podcast, I'm always curious about what the guests were like when they were growing up. So
hmm
the first question I wanted to ask you is, what was Neha like as a student, as a child, growing up? What were you curious about? What did you study at school? And maybe you can tell me about your friends or parents. So stories from your childhood, to start off with.
Yeah. Thanks for asking that, Abhishek. I rarely do talk about my childhood. It was pretty tense. It was not a very happy childhood as someone would imagine. Not because there were some issues or, my like it was a happy family. My parents, I am the eldest sibling and I am a girl daughter, and I'm a girl child and I am the eldest child, and I was very very ambitious. I was a very bright child. As a student, I was hated by my classmates, obviously so, because I was quite bright. I was the apple of my teacher's eye, and some of the teachers also didn't like me because they thought I was too bright. So I think that set me up for failure, which I didn't know at that point of time. As a child, I was very very curious. I was a bookworm. I didn't. I grew up in a family which didn't place too much of importance on studies and especially on reading. And especially being a girl child, we were expected to be just about get through with our studies and do our homework and do some playtime, take care of younger siblings, take care of the household chores, pretty much the standard middle class upbringing in 90s India. But I think what made my childhood an unhappy place, I didn't realize at that point of time that I was unhappy. But in retrospect, I think I was unhappy as a child. I was very, very dissatisfied because my ambitions were too big for my life at that point of time. I loved to read, and I was not allowed to read by my parents because they thought I have bad eyesight. I have a bad case of myopia. My eye power is really, really high. And I think it is hereditary, it is genetic. But my parents also, like at that point of time, there were these kind of myths that if you study too much, your eyesight will get spoiled. So, we have to preserve your eyesight. Like, you can't go blind. That's going to be the ultimate tragedy. So I was kept away from books, and I found my solace in, reading nutritional labels pretty early on the back of any box that I found, reading shampoo bottles while I was in the bathroom and spending, instead of the 10 minutes that it usually took to take a bath, I would spend about 20-25 minutes, 10-15 of which would be reading the labels of detergent powders and Dettol bottles. And so I was really, really curious. Give me a piece of paper and I would read it back and front. I was that kind of a child. I remember once I was going through some stuff, and I have a huge family. We used to live in a joint family, and I found some stack of books which belonged to my aunt, my bua. And she was married, and I found her books, and I realized they were biology books, and they were too grown up for my standard, I would say. I was really young, but I was so deprived of a reading material, of available books, that I read it cover to cover. I didn't understand any of it, I'm sure, but just the feeling of to be able to grasp those words, make out the meaning, literal meaning of that. And in that to that effect, I ended up reading a lot of mythological books as well, because my grandfather was a really religious man. He didn't impose his thoughts on us as his grandkids, but he had a lot of reading material, a lot of Gorakhpur Gita Press stuff. And I would read all of those things cover to cover, just to satiate my curiosity for reading. So yeah, that pretty much was my childhood. I used to love school. I used to really, really love giving exams, contrary to what a lot of other people think and believe, and feel about schools and exams. I used to love them because I thought that was one place where I could kind of prove my mettle. And I was not even a very studious person in that sense. Like, I was not always neck deep into my studies, so to say, but I was very sharp. I was very bright. I used to read once. I used to study something. I used to really understand it, and I used to remember those things. And then when it came the time, so surprise tests in schools were my one of my favorite things, because I was like, oh my god, yes, I know this, that kind of a feeling. I was quite competitive as well. I was very competitive, and I used to like being on top. I used to more or less, I used to be a topper in my school. I used to be all the I used to be very good in extracurriculars as well. I was like if you I was a textbook student. I was a very classic good student. um Not to say that it served very well in my later life, but it was what it was. I was a good student.
Yeah, and as you were speaking, Neha, I was thinking that sometimes we underestimate the amount of pressures that is on a child as well. And
Yeah.
as a parent and as a student in the past yourself, when you were speaking, I'm thinking even the student that's doing really well at school, they have their own insecurities, their own worries and fears, and at the end of the day all children need love and care and that nurturing. But I'm so intrigued by how curious you were about the world and how hungry for knowledge you were, and that was like a general sort of drive, and so much so that when the books were in there you would turn to labels or whatever. That's quite rare. I've not seen people that naturally gravitate towards reading so much. But in terms of your life as a reader, Neha, I know it's such an important part of your identity
Yeah.
as an adult. So if you go back to the first books you read, how did that love for books come up? Was there, can you tell me about the first books you remember reading? And was it like comics and then chapter books, or what was your journey, early journey as a reader like?
I very recently remembered something. I didn't remember it for the very large part of my adulthood. And I recently remembered that I was always drawn to books. That much I know. But in my head, books were always thick books. When I'm in most of my adulthood, that's what I thought of books as. But I remembered recently that in during summer vacations, my family, my because I used to live in a joint family, someone or the other from my family used to feed my love for reading
Mm.
by getting me books in my summer vacations. And these would be chapter books, these would be magazines, a lot of magazines. Champak, Chanda Mama. I didn't ever have subscriptions for them. But we were a very very large family, so someone would say, some bhaiya of mine would go somewhere and bring some 4 or 5 books and say that these are for Neha, and Neha loves to read books. And that would keep me occupied for some time. Those are the things that I remember from my childhood. In terms of early books, sadly, I don't remember what were the books that I started with and how did this begin. I think it came to me in terms of the metaphor that comes to me is that of waves. It didn't come as a steady stream of resources that were readily available to me. For a very, very long time, I was denied this pleasure of reading. And suddenly, it just came to me. From what I can remember, maybe I'm fabricating it because I don't remember large parts of my journey when it comes to reading. But in my 11th standard, I switched school, and suddenly I was in a big school. Till the 10th standard, I was in a pretty small school, but in 11th standard, I switched, and suddenly we had access to this big huge library. I remember spending a lot of my time in the library. We I don't think we were allowed to spend time outside of the designated hours inside the library. So but the whatever time I could get in the library, I would just maximize that. I remember going through the shelves and uh, just hungrily lapping up whatever was available. And interestingly, it was not just restricted to non-study books. it was also the textbooks, the reference books, and I suddenly had access to so much that I just was like, oh my god, let me just take whatever I can, and just that was the beginning, I would say, of this love, uh, which no realization of this love. Beginning, I think, were always in the childhood beginnings. I can't really put a put a timestamp to it, but suddenly I had access and I just lapped it up. And then I decided to do, because I loved books so much, I realized that I would have never have access to them in the way that I would want to. So I decided to do literature in my graduation, only because it would, only at that point of time, only because it would give me access to books and it would allow me to read books. Little did I know that it takes away the joy when you study something so deeply and so meticulously. It's not the books that you are just reading for fun. It becomes an exercise in itself. But that was what it was. And yeah, so these two things, I think, access to a big library and then deciding to do literature as part of my undergraduation. These were the things that I remember from that journey. And in terms of titles, if you ask me that question, what are the books that I remember, I don't remember any names.
Yeah, I loved hearing that, Neha, because the life of a reader is, with so many bumps and highs and lows and slumps, and, there are so many recommendations I got, from your Instagram account, which
Oh, you did?
I did, yes. And I think the way you also talk about books, it shows this genuine love and curiosity, for
Thank
the
you.
medium. It seems like books are almost like another very close friend that you find a
Yes.
lot of comfort and space in. And, when
Yes.
you were speaking about it, it's so different for someone to say that it came in waves rather than having, like a direct linear growth.
Yeah.
So that was very fascinating, and I think we have that in common, where we both studied literature.
Oh, you
Uh,
did
I
too?
I did, yes, and I did it much later on. But I'm just saying, when you said that studying something so deeply can reduce the love for it, I related to that so much,
Yeah.
because when I was doing literature, so much of the analysis was so critical and theoretical, and the books, we didn't have much say in sometimes choosing the texts,
Yeah.
so I was quite surprised that I loved reading, and then I came here, and it sort of became a burden.
Yes.
So for anyone, and a lot of readers have this, closet dream where they think that, oh, what if I studied literature? So tell us, Neha, what was that? I mean, tell us the pros and cons of studying literature at the undergraduate level. What was that experience like for you? And also how it helped you develop an appreciation for language, because communication is such a big part of your professional
Yeah.
identity. So if you could go back to that time and tell me about that experience and how it impacted your reading and professional life in the long run.
So for me, it was, I don't think if I can generalize this, because it was so unique to my own life story and where I was, and from where I came, and, where I wanted to go. I didn't know where I want to go at that point of time. But something that I can now, I mean, at that point also, I realized while it was happening that, it was almost like my transformation happened during those 3 years of undergraduation. Of course, it started much earlier, but, I think I really, really bloomed in those 3 years of my graduation. It may not have necessarily been because of what I studied, but a large part of it was because of that. Literature allows you for having conflicting thoughts. Literature allows you for having different perspectives. It allows you for respecting different perspectives, to for disagreeing to agree, agreeing to disagree. And also, I think a lot of appreciation for nuance. in life stems from, at least in my life, stems from the fact that I studied literature. And especially, I owe it to a couple of my professors from that time. The way they would take up a text and, turn it into into a life lesson. We always see, I'm going to talk about some of the not not liked part of literature, studying literature, and turn it around. I studied books first, and then I studied ads, so to say, and films, so to say, in my post graduation. And people like my batchmates and my contemporaries, we have this running joke that, books were ruined because of the fact that I studied literature, and ads were ruined and films were ruined because of the fact that I studied at MICA. But for me, I think, I mean, it's fine as long as it's about a joke. But when it comes to appreciating what it gave me an immense clarity about how to approach something, about holding different opinions and not judging someone based on that, and appreciating the fact that we can have nuanced outlooks in life. And I started appreciating fluidity in life much more. Earlier, I don't know if I ever was a black or white person, but the gray started to appeal to me much more. Nothing was purely good or purely bad. No person was ever completely right or completely wrong. And these kind of binaries, I think the uh, the melting away of these boundaries and these uh, cast in stone definitions was something that I really took away from my time studying. And in terms of expression, yes, and I have to tell you something. I English is not my first language. And I was, even though I was a reader, I knew words, I knew the language, I knew the script, but I was really a very bad speaker of English. Till at least I came to the big school in 11th standard. Till that time, I was in a small school, so whatever came to me of the language was mostly of the written language, not of the spoken language. We used to speak in Hindi, even though it was an English medium school, but even the teachers were not that fluent in English. And suddenly I come to this big school and everybody is speaking in English, and even though I know the answers, how it goes with a small town child, that even though you know the answers, you are not raising your hand because you don't know how to express the answers. By the time you have formulated that, you have translated from Hindi to English, that sentence you have made, the teacher has moved on, and there is the next question that she is asking or he is asking. So I think I really bloomed in terms of learning to speak the language. I worked on myself. I also, my confidence took a hit, in terms of, I was always a very underconfident kid. Even though I was a very bright kid, I was an underconfident kid only because I didn't know how to be in the diverse spaces that I had come to be at only by an accident. I didn't know how to conduct myself. I didn't know how to speak the language of the masses, which was English. I didn't know how to pronounce certain words, and I didn't know, things like, I don't remember if I did that, but I would have done things like, I wouldn't know the difference between the O sound and the R sound, and I would have maybe pronounce some words wrong, then I was rebuked and I was made fun of because of all that. And I think my confidence really took a hit, and that's why probably I liked exams also, because in exams there was no speaking of the language, there was only expression, written expression, and I was really good at that. So that happened for me. So I think what my college and my school, later part of my school, did for my confidence was really something, both in terms of giving me the avenue to express myself in terms of English language, and also kind of widening and broadening my horizon when it comes to perspectives and opinions and ways of being and ways of thinking, all of that. I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, you did. You went above and beyond, Neha. And in
Thank
terms
you.
of and like right after your literature degree, Neha, like were you, because sometimes it can be a little vague in terms of what your professional choices were, and I struggled with that a lot after my literature degree. Is, do I want to maybe pursue journalism, pursue advertising, pursue a career in writing, or continue doing a master's? So what was going on in your mind, like when you were coming to the end of that degree? Like, did you know what career you wanted to go down, and what did you decide to do eventually?
Oh, I'm glad you asked me that question, because for me it was very different. I knew before I studied literature that I what I wanted to do in my post graduation, and that was kind of the moot point between my father and I when I decided to go in for literature. So like I knew I would go do an MBA before I went into literature. So my father, because I took commerce in my 11th and 12th standard, so the standard expectation of my parents was that I would do a BCom honors, and then I would do a CA, and then I would get into the family business, and things like that. That was the kind of envisioned path for me by my parents. But while I was in school, I happened to get to know by accident that for doing an MBA, you don't, even though MBA is a business course, you don't need a commerce degree as a prerequisite. You just need to be a graduate. And that came to me as a lifeline. I thought, okay, CA, like, CA is too bookish for me. I don't want to do CA. I want to do an MBA. So that's fine. And in the 3 years that are, I saw the graduation years as a stepping stone to the post graduation years, not as a building block for that at that point of time. And I think it worked well for me, because I could convince my parents that, look, I would do an MBA. That is the goal. Now, how I reach that goal, let me decide that. I don't want to do a BCom honors or a BCom. I want to study literature. So that's how I convinced my parents, and thankfully they got convinced, and I got to study literature. One thing also, it was, as I told you, that I come from a very orthodox family. I didn't know whether I would be given a chance to do the post graduation, because in my families, girls used to do post graduation only as something to do while they wait to find a partner. So while they wait to get married, there is nothing else to do. So let's just enroll ourselves in college and do a post graduation degree. I didn't want my post graduation to be a waiting game, and I wanted to ensure that I did that. So what I did, I think it was pretty smart for that time. I asked my parents to enroll myself in a preparatory course for the CAT exam, because money was short, while I was growing up. My parents were not what you would term particularly rich. They were very, very, very middle class, very, very hand to mouth kind of family. And so I remember that it was 30,000 worth of course, and my plan or my game plan was that if they make 30,000 worth of investment in a preparatory course for the entrance exam for a post graduation course, they won't stop me from taking that exam, because my fear was that what if they find me a boy before I can even take that exam. So I so yeah, I my thing was, in my head I was playing the long game, that okay, invest 30,000, prepare for the exam, take the exam, and get admission in a post graduation program. So I was securing those 2 years of post graduation, and I was playing for that, and somehow it worked, and my dad agreed to have me enroll in a preparatory program. And I think that was also a really, really good time in terms of learning. Even though you don't learn anything fundamentally new, I think it just makes you confident in a completely new light. I knew that I'm preparing for something big. And yeah, I took cat. And at that point of time, so when it you asked me, did I know which route I wanted to take for my career, I knew I wanted to do an MBA, but what kind of an MBA I didn't know. And I didn't think too much about it at that point of time. And looking back, I can say that Micah was the best choice for me in terms of my personality, my talents, if at all I have any, and the kind of person I am, the kind of career I chose, and it all fits very well. But the time that I was going through that journey, I didn't know anything about Micah. I am kind of ashamed to admit that I didn't know of Micah as a college. Me and my best friend at that point of time, we were preparing for our entrance exam together, and she had her eyes set on Micah. And I asked her, what is this college? And she showed me the brochure and she showed me everything. And I was like, it's such a niche course. And why do you want to do this course? And it looks fine. It looks okay if you get into it. But why would you want to get into it? Like, why would you not want to do something more, which is more kind of broad? And my inclination was to either go to, I remember I really wanted to go to IIM Lucknow, or I wanted to go to IIM Kozhikode, or MDI in Gurgaon. These were I don't know the reasons now, I don't remember the reasons now, but these were the three colleges that I wanted to get into. And this friend of mine, she had her eyes set on only one college, that was Micah. And because we were preparing together, we ended up filling the same forms, and I filled the form for Micah only because Sakshi, my friend, was filling it. And it so happened that she got the college of my choice, which was MDI, and I got the college of her choice, which was Micah. So Micah happened totally by accident, by a turn of fate, not by planning. But yes, post graduation in management is something that I wanted to do. That was decided well in advance, even before I went in for my undergraduation.
Very, very interesting. Yeah. And like in Micah, what are the possible career paths for someone that pursues that? Because I'm thinking about like if there's a student that's interested
Yeah.
in communications or branding or
Yes.
media, like just to give them a glimpse of what are the possible courses? I mean, what are the courses you learn in that sort of setup, and what are
Yes.
the possible career pathways for someone that goes down that line?
Okay, so my knowledge might be a little dated, Abhishek. I graduated from Mica, I think approximately 15 years back now, but I don't know what is happening these days, and I should have been better prepared for this. But in my time, and I think the basic structure remains the same. There are about 3 4 majors that you can do in Mica. One is media management, which is what I did. One is brand management, which is the largest chunk. Another is advertising management, and then there is media research or consumer research. If not media research, it's one is the research based, one is advertising based, one is media based, and one is brand based. Largely the course remains the same
Hmm.
for everybody who's doing it. 5 6 credit courses here and there make the complete difference in terms of what you happen to be majoring in. And I always believed, even while I was at Mica, I believed in building a portfolio, not a major in that sense. I just picked and chose courses which I liked, not because they were fitting in a certain kind of major. So I never intended to do a media management major. It just happened by chance because those were the credits that I ended up taking.
Hmm.
That kind of a thing. And in terms of career paths, I think there are very very interesting courses. Before I get into the career path, I must talk about the courses that we have back at Mica. They are very interesting courses. They're about consumer choices and human psychology and semiotics and film studies and how a product is made, how it is marketed, how it is branded. And it's like a complete life cycle of a product, of a brand more so. And how do stories come about, how do they play a part in furthering a narrative, or things like that. So there is a lot of takeaway from the course if you are thinking not just from the career perspective.
Hmm.
And that was my journey at Mica, because when it came to the career path, I think I was not the best example. I was not placed, I was not the first ones to be placed during the summer placement process. And while there are traditional placement paths which include advertising agencies, FMCG companies, any organization which has a brand function, and any consumer research organization. My career path was very very different, and it just happened much like many other things in my life by accident. So I don't think I am the right person to talk about what are the possible career paths when you come out of Mica, but I can talk about my journey.
Yeah, thank you for that overview, Neha. And I was thinking about brands and stories, Neha. The other day I was at the mall with my friend, and we were just having this conversation. Like, if you look around this mall, each shop is trying to tell us a story,
Yeah.
telling us a story about what colors the brand represents and the associations with those colors. Even with the typography on the
Yeah.
brand title, there's a story there, because some was serif, some was sans serif.
Yeah.
Like a suit brand had a more formal font. uh, like a kids store had a more Comic Sans sort of font. And
Yes.
I was just thinking that brands and the ads that they put out to market their products, they're telling stories, though not in the
Yes.
form of books or films, but stories that tell you what the original customer's pain point is and how they are solving it. So, I wanted to jump into your, your professional experiences, and
Sure.
you've had like a diverse set of experiences, Nia. You worked with like a government early on in your career, with media companies as a research analyst. You were also a business manager at a design corporation, and then you worked as a director of marketing at a football academy.
Yeah.
So it's so diverse, and it's so, but it also has that thread of branding and communications running through it. So if you could tell me about, like briefly about your these years of experiences leading up to you finding your consultancy, like your how has your thinking evolved about branding over this 7 to 8 year period or even more.
Sure. Actually, I don't know if I started to think about my career in that sense, but yes, in terms of what I thought of brands and storytelling has always remained anchored in the thought that it has to be authentic. And that's how uh, my entry into any space has been, and that's how my exit from any space has been. Like, to start with, when I went into the government job, it was at the government of Gujarat, and at that point of time, it was for the very first time that a government department had come to take students for from campus placement. And it was a very interesting profile, and just because it sounded something different and sounded nice, I decided to take it up. And from in there, we were doing, within that also, we were a diverse group of people. We were, I think, about seven students, 6 7 batchmates, who were selected for that particular role. And then we got divided up, and we had our own responsibilities. Some of us got assigned print advertisements, some of us got assigned films, and I think a colleague and I got assigned the department's website, the whole digital presence, and the newsletter. I think that was not in terms of what I did, but in terms of who my boss was. He was he was, what you call it? Sorry, I'm drawing a blank. But
Let's say it's like
what
somewhat senior in the government.
Yes, he was an IS officer, and he was very very senior in the department. He was the senior most person in the department, and he taught us a lot about the value of discipline, the value of showing up on time, the value of being, approachable and things like that. And it also helped, because there were only two girls, of two of us who were women in that department full of men. And it was very funny, and also quite humbling to see how people would not look at us while they would talk, they would not make eye contact and things like that. So I think that job of mine was a very big learning experience. It was an 11th month contract, and I did decide not to renew the contract, because I realized something, that while you get into something big like a government job, you have big dreams. You think that, oh, hum dunya badal denge, and I can change the system. But then you realize that you have to stay within the system and work at it, and sometimes do things which may not go well with your conscience, and do things against your standards or ethics, or things like that. So I was very uncomfortable with all of that, and there were only two options in front of me: that stay uncomfortable and continue with that, or to get out of the system. And I picked I think, the easy path that I just decided to get out of the system. And the second job that I had was with a media research firm. This was a job that, I think I was very lucky in terms of the places that I have always worked at, because I think I have really, really enjoyed my time doing what I did and learning all that I could. I mean, I never saw it as, one step leading to the other. I just enjoyed where I was when I was there at that point of time, and I think it has kept me in really good stead. Because if you think of it, that okay, like if I had decided to think of my job at the media research firm as something which is a stepping stone to my next profile, I don't think, I mean, there was no next profile.
Hmm.
I don't know what I would have done.
Yeah.
So, but I decided, I don't know if I decided that, but it is who I am as a person. Wherever I am, I think I really uh, enjoy that particular phase of my life and part of my life. And so what that's what I did, and it was really, really fun. I was working directly with the founder of the organization, who also happens to be a very sharp, very intelligent, very, very compassionate human being. His name is Shailesh. He is the founder of this organization called Ormax Media, and he was my boss at that point of time. And Shailesh was our visiting faculty back at Micah, and I was writing my thesis, and I happened to discuss it with him, and he remembered it, and we stayed in touch. Back then Twitter was just coming up, and I was stationed in Gandhinagar during my first job, which was kind of a dead town in Gujarat. Only we used to joke back then, only six Micah students, IS officers, and old people and old trees live in this town. So it was that kind of, quiet, peaceful town. And coming straight from a campus life, it was very, very lonely in that sense. And I think I also enjoyed my time there, and Twitter became my kind of place of refuge in that sense. And Shailesh and I kept in touch, and we used to banter sometimes on Twitter. And then once, jokingly, he asked me, I was cribbing about my job, just in jest, and jokingly he asked me that, we can work together or something of that sort. And I said, okay, I'm ready when you are, and things like that. And he just happened to said, okay, let's take this offline. And I asked him, I said, are you serious? And he said, I am serious if you are. Let's do this. And that's how, I didn't know what I'm going to do, when I join him. But I decided to join him back at that point of time, when my contract was coming to an end. So after my government job, I went to this, and we worked on media research. Media research now has become very big with Shailesh's company, but before Shailesh ventured into this field, not many people knew what research was in context of media, in context of films, in context of TV, in context of radio. I think he is the person in India who revolutionized this whole field. And I am very, very fortunate to have worked with him, directly under him and with him on this. And it was such a great learning experience, both in terms of the subject matter and in terms of life lessons. He that also, I mean, I enjoyed my time there. I We used to do, my profile was, I used to do research for radio. That was, I was handling the entire portfolio of radio. We used to make playlists based on research for a radio station. And we used to do song research, and it was just so much fun. Then I started doing work in TV research as well. I worked on a research product where we used to evaluate concepts based on audience understanding, and it was just so much fun. But I think I'm also a person who gets bored quite easily. And not easily, like, in a month or a 2 month, but in a couple of years, I need to do something else. So after a point, I decided, okay, this is not for me anymore. Not that this is not for me. I had done that for 2.5 years. But then I decided that, okay, bahut ho gaya, and I don't want to do this anymore. And I decided to call it quits and then look for something else. Then I joined Elephant in Gurgaon. Shavik is was my boss there. Again, he was handling the Delhi office of Elephant, and he was at the helm of it. And I worked directly with him and under him in my third job, which was effectively my last job at a corporate sector. And I loved my time there. When I joined that organization, I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know what my role is going to be. I didn't know anything about that, but I just decided to take it as it came. And I loved working with him. I think I have really gotten lucky in terms of the kind of mentors I've got along the journey, the kind of bosses I've got along the journey, and they have taught me as much as my job has taught me. And I have also been like, I think this is my reading of it. Of course, my bosses can disagree if they have a opposing point of view. But I think I was also very, very curious, very, very open, very hungry for knowledge and for learning and for new experiences. So I would just, whenever there would be something, I would just put my hand up and say that, okay, let's do this. And I want to do this, I want to take it up, even though it was not a part of my job profile directly. If there was something new, I wanted to do this. If there was something interesting, I wanted to be a part of it. And um, I never hesitated to have a voice and to put forth my voice at a workplace. So I don't remember what the question was and what we're discussing.
No,
And I am so sorry. I am going all over the
no,
place.
this is perfect, yeah, because I think it is such a long period of your professional life, right? And you actually did a really good job, telling me how you moved from one job to the other and the reasons. So the question was about your professional experiences over this 7 to 10 year period. And you actually covered it really well. You told me about your first job and then the second, and you went into the third, but you also told me about how the expectations were very different in each context. Like in the
Yes,
government job it was so different. In Ormax Media, it was also one of the pioneers in the media research
yes,
space. And then in Elephant Media you were also working on a different sort of scope. And I think this
yes.
feeds in really well into why did you decide to go off into your own entrepreneurial path. Where did that shift happen for you? Like, did you feel like that was something you always wanted to do, or it just came up as a professional thing for you?
I think it was a mix of everything. I think it was kind of it was like a point where my entire life was building towards that kind of a thing, because I come from a very typical Bania family where everybody is doing their own business.
Hmm.
And um, actually, I was the first person in my family to ever have a job,
Hmm.
to work for someone else. And that was, in a way, that was a point of pride as well as something to be looked down upon, both at the same time. So in our heads, it was always fed from our childhood that you work for yourself,
Hmm.
you create opportunities, you create employment for others, but you don't become an employee.
Hmm.
I think it was never that clearly articulated, but it was very, very tacit, very something we were conditioned to see, believe, and grow up with. And that kind of was there at the back of my head, that and also being in those three jobs that I was, uh, they were very, even though they were corporate jobs
Hmm.
in their own sense, they were very, very different from the conventional corporate setup.
Hmm.
All three of them, I had the supreme flexibility. I had the good fortune of having very, very good mentor
Hmm.
relationships with my bosses. And they just kind of took me under their wings, all three of them, and let me just bloom. That's the word that comes to my mind when I think of all three of my bosses. And uh, and I realized that by that time you also have friends and who are working in other organizations, and you end up talking to a lot of their friends, and most of your conversations are either around they're only around two three topics, right? They're either around your jobs, which forms a large part of your life. They're around your dating life. They're around your family life. And these two three things are what you talk about. And a lot of my conversations with my friends used to be about their jobs, and everybody had only one thing to say, that how frustrated they are, and how dissatisfied they are, how. And I would say that I am happy in my job. So and I realized that I was the outlier.
Hmm.
This was not a typical experience that people have in their jobs. So that kind of put me in that mind frame, that okay, conventional corporate setup doesn't allow for this kind of flexibility, this kind of openness, this kind of curiosity, to thrive.
Yeah.
So kind of that foundation was being set for
Hmm.
me to pursue my own path. But how did it come about was also something very interesting. I had just gotten fed up of my third job, and this is not to say that the job was bad. It's just my personality, that I told you that I get bored of things, and I had done that for again 2.5 3 years, and I was like, okay, now I'm done, and I just need to move on. And when I broke this news to my boss, he was shocked, because he said that you're doing so well, and why do you want to leave, and are you unhappy, and this. Nothing of that sort. I love doing my work, but I'm just bored. I just want to do something else. And my boss is like, what will you do? I said, I don't know what will I do. And I didn't have any plan. I just quit without a plan.
Hmm.
And what I wanted to do at that point of time was, I wanted to work in impact sector. I didn't know what I'd do there. I didn't know how I would get there, but I wanted to work there. So I said that okay, I don't know what's the next step, but the next step is not to stay here.
Hmm.
That's the next step. So that's how I quit my job, and that's how slowly I started figuring things out, and took a lot of time off on personal front, and figuring things out. And at that time I didn't have any responsibilities. I was single. I was staying with my parents. There was no rent to pay. There was no groceries to buy. Everything that I mean, of course, in addition to saving up for your life ahead and to build a bank balance, everything that I was earning was kind of a bonus pocket money.
Yeah.
It was not a necessity. So earning was not a necessity at that point of time. So I think I was not operating from a place of want or need. Sorry, I was not operating from a place of need. I was operating from a place of want. And at that point of time I didn't need to continue working to, because that job was not serving me anymore. So
Hmm.
I just decided to call it quits.
And like even because it is quite scary, right? And you had to go off on your own, when you are in the corporate sector. It takes a lot of bravery and courage to carve out your own path. And I feel like some of that inherent entrepreneurial spirit, that set in you from a young age maybe gave you the courage, because the corporate jobs sometimes, I've as someone that's worked in it briefly, I've noticed, because you're so lower down the ladder, it can feel a little detached from the actual impact. So you don't get to
Yes.
see the impact of your work, which over time can build up, in terms of where you are at life, the autonomy you want, and how that can like build up, and like in terms of your, like in addition to your branding, right? Yeah, and this is where I wanted to sort of throw light on the perspective that careers may look linear, but there's so many other factors that have to be considered, like your
Yeah.
personal life, right? And how that changes and how that can influence your career decisions as well. So I'm just curious about, as you were starting your own organization. It's been like since 2017, about 8 to 9 years now, Neha.
Yes.
So it's such a long time. So you've been doing this for, a considerable amount of time. But two other projects that you are really passionate about is your podcast and your book club. So if you could tell me about the podcast, but also, maybe throw some light on your journey as a parent and what being a parent has taught you about being a human. This is sort of the other side of being on the Parenthood with Neha podcast. So I think
Yeah, it's like suddenly parenthood with Abhishek. I'm like, oh my God.
and I have no experience, so I am clueless. I'm just, listening to like a
So
expert on
I can
it.
say anything and get away with it.
Probably yes, and I wouldn't be able to say if it's right or wrong, But I think, yeah, like tell me about, like not just the podcast, because I feel like when I was listening, I've listened to like 3 or 4 episodes, yeah, and
Hmm.
I realized that each parent is so unique. And I think I
Yeah.
realized that after listening to your podcast, there's no perfect way to parent.
Yes.
And I think every parent is an expert on their child because they are the only ones that know the tiny details of what has happened over time. I'm
Yes.
saying this as someone that doesn't have any responsibilities. So tell me, what was it like to, be a parent, and why the podcast over time?
Okay, so before I get into how it has been being a parent, let me just tell you something that I was telling my husband a couple of days back. I was like, before he was born, how the hell did we have the courage to say that we are busy? How the hell did we say that? We were not busy. What were we busy with? What were we busy with? Like, we had no work at all.
Yeah,
Because with a child, I don't know, it just, life is just so busy.
yeah.
It's so packed, especially with a toddler at hand. Mine is 2 years old now. And but it is, I think it's the most fulfilling part of my life. And I was a mom before I gave birth to my son. I was a dog mom before that. I had 4 dog kids.
Wow.
And for a very long time I thought that was my life. I didn't want to bring a human child into the equation. But then things changed and my mind changed, and we decided to have a human child, and he came. And I think what it has been like, it has just been so fulfilling. That's what I can say. It has just been so damn exhausting. I don't think I, even when I get a chance to rest, I don't think I'm ever fully resting. So it's very, very exhausting. It's, what helped us was that we were very prepared.
Hmm.
We didn't get into it because it was time for us to become parents. We didn't get into it because my parents or his parents were pressurizing us to become parents. We didn't get into it because we had nothing else to do, so let's become parents, things like that. It was a very well thought out decision, and I think we were ready to take that kind of, we'd had mm, many number of years together as a couple to figure out what we were like with each other. We had yeah, so we were quite prepared, and we are both very very logical people. We are both, my husband and I both, we are very logical, we are very level headed, we are very very strong headed, and we are very intellectual parents, I would say. And that may not necessarily be a good thing, because we tend to scientify, I don't know if that's even a word, a lot of things. Like, it has to make sense for it to be followed for us. So we read up a lot. We, even with little things that we did with our son, we read up about it, we researched, we argued, we kind of had a discourse. We everybody, both of us in that equation, like we had to come up with our own pros and cons and convince the other person that why, if I am choosing something for him, why I think it's the right choice. So not any decision, I would say, when it came to parenting was made lightly, as far, and is made lightly, I would say. So that's how it has been. I think it's testing our metal. It's testing our I think my whole life has been leading up to this moment, kind of a feeling that I get. It's very, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful beautiful phase of life, but it's also not easy. It's not, sometimes it's not pleasant. Sometimes it's a lot of work, not just in terms of the physical work. It's a lot of mental work, it's a lot of emotional work. So that is there. And in that process, I realized, while I was in the initial months of my journey as a mother, I realized that there was so much of information available about how to parent. What books to read to the child, from that to what nutrition to give to the child, tips and tricks and hacks and all of that. But nobody is talking about the people playing those roles. Nobody is talking about the parents. And before I became a mother, parents were largely invisible to me as a separate category of people. I never looked at parents as something who would demand attention or my bandwidth, mental bandwidth. I was like, हाँ ठीक है, मतलब, you are raising a child, so what? But the moment I became a mother, there was a newfound solidarity and a newfound respect for people who used to do this. And suddenly I found myself reaching out to friends and reaching out to people I knew, and I was like, oh my god, I now know. I am so sorry I didn't know earlier. I am And I realized that this is such a lonely journey. I realized that so many of us who are parents, so many of us are working parents,
Yeah.
and in the office you just see them as any other employee. You don't see them as parents, and there is no space for them to be visible as parents, because like, nobody, there is so much going on before you come to office. Like, maybe you have fought 100 battles to get there. Your child is woken up with a fever, your child is woken up on the wrong side of the bed, you have had a sleepless night, the nanny is not showing up, the daycare is shut, and things like that. Vaccination is due, baby has a fever because of vaccination. So many things you are fighting before you reach work. And then at work you are operating as a robot with no space to show those emotions, no space for for that side of your personality or that side of your life to be visible.
Yeah.
And अप्रिशिएट तो कैसे ही करेंगे, मतलब जब दिखता ही नहीं है वो चीज. एंड आई एज अ नॉन पेरेंट have no idea what is going on in somebody's
So
life.
true.
So where do the parents go?
Yeah.
Like, how do the parents cope? That was my own quest, and I found no answers. I found, and I turned to online resources. The only resources available were either very extreme things, either tips or tricks, or my therapist.
Mm.
I wanted something in the middle. I wanted something, and I wanted, purely out of selfish reasons, selfish motive being that I wanted to hear how other parents did it. I wanted to know what's their story. And I can't just go running around and saying that, hey, Abhishek, tell me about your parenting journey. And, I want to know. So
Yeah.
I said, okay, why not make a podcast out of it? So, and in that sense, I'm also building a resource for some other parents who might be struggling like I was.
True.
And, uh, and of course, at the primary level, I'm getting to hear the stories. So that's where the podcast was born.
Yeah, and for the listeners tuning in, I will be linking Neha's podcast in the show notes. It's one of the most wonderful resources on parenting. I think the additional benefits it's that is it's focused on an Indian context, what it's like to be a parent in modern India, and I think what's really great about Neha as a host is she speaks from experience, but she also allows the stories of the other parents to come through and their own narratives to come through. So even though I'm not a parent, I feel like listening to the podcast has given me so much joy and delight. It's also helped me process and come to terms with my relationship with my parents. And I think I didn't completely understand the nuance and the effort that goes into being a parent on a day-to-day basis. And I think you truly understand that when you become a parent yourself. But for someone that doesn't have that experience, I think your podcast sort of gave me a glimpse of that, Neha. So I know as podcasters there can seem like there's a selfish reason we do this, because there's a joy in the conversation, and
Yeah.
a lot of people think, why do you keep doing this? It's so much work and effort. But I think it's about connecting with other people about things you deeply feel about,
Yeah.
deeply connect to. And I think that's the true joy in podcasting. And thank you for your podcast, Nia. It's not only for parents, but also for people like me, like, that are curious about the topic, that are coming to terms with our values about if we want to be a parent, if we don't want to
Yeah.
be a parent. There's a whole audience there that's also curious about that. And I think in popular media we only get the narratives that are the extremes, as you said,
Yes.
like the the difficult part of being a parent, the extremely happy part of being a parent. But I think in your podcast it's more the day to day, what
Yeah.
is that like. So I'll leave that conversation for the listeners. Please tune into Parenthood with Neha. It's available on YouTube and all most podcasting platforms too. But Neha, like the final question I wanted to ask you is about, your love for reading. And I
Yeah.
know we spoke about this in the start, but your book club. I've joined a couple of book clubs here in Mumbai, and joining a book club has just enhanced my reading experience so much. Because earlier reading was just about reading and thinking about my own associations. But recently I went to a book club and there were things that people said that I was like, I never thought about that. Why didn't I think about that? I wanted
Yeah.
to have that realization. How did you? And it's also such a nice way to look at different ways of reading as well. So
Yeah.
tell me more about your book club and how has it helped you as a reader in general?
Yeah. Okay, so I have two book clubs. I have an online book club and I have an offline book club. The offline book club is a very, very recent one that was born out of my need to find like minded people and to have real conversations, because most of my conversations that are stimulating for me happen either in my house with my partner, or they happen online with either my clients or my podcast guests or my online book club. So I was starved for a space where I could interact with like-minded people, have intellectual conversations with them at in real time, physically. So that's how this offline book club was born. And we've had one meet, we have read two books together, we are due to have a second meet, and mostly there are women in the book club, mostly yeah, yeah, all of them are women. And it's a great space in that sense. And it's like just any book club, so I would not like to talk much about that. But what I would like to talk about is my online book club. I think that's what is a real joy in my life, because it's a very different kind of book club, if I might say so myself. It's not a book club in the most traditional sense. It is a book reading club. We read books together. So every Thursday we meet on Zoom, and we one person reads aloud. We have pre-chosen a book that we are reading at any particular time period of time, and one person reads aloud. The others just follow along, either whether they have a book with them or not have a book with them. Regardless of that, they just follow along. And it's an hour long session, and we read for about 50 minutes together, and in the last 10 minutes we just share our thoughts, what happened, what we how we felt, and all of that, and how we are doing, and all of that, like, little chit chat. It may be related to the book, it may not be related to the book, but most importantly, we read together. And what I have come to realize, two three very interesting thing that book club has done for me. When I'm reading by myself, whether it's for myself or whether it's for the book club, offline book club, what I realize is there is no space to pause. I just keep reading. But with the online book reading club, what happens is that you read for 50 minutes and there is an inbuilt pause because of the design of the book club, that you will pause and then you will come back to that book next week. For 1 week you are not touching the book at all. I mean, you're not obligated to. So that one is that. So basically it gives you that pause to reflect, to think, to absorb, to process. All of that happens. Then every week you are discussing about what you read that week. So there is an immediate kind of reaction response happening. So that is something that is very very interesting. And the third thing that happens is sometimes you don't want to read, right? But just because you are this is kind of inbuilt in your schedule. Like now I know that Thursdays are book club days, so it's like it's inbuilt. So even though I can't find time in my routine to read. If I can't find, it's very difficult for me as Neha to say that I can't find time because I live for reading. But if I can't find time for reading, I know that come Thursday 8:30 p.m. I will log in and I will read. That's another thing. And I think very, very recently, what I have realized, a new thing about this book club, what it has given me, the joy of this club has been reading difficult books. There are some books which are so, they can be anything. They can be something that you don't want to get through. They are very difficult. They evoke such emotions that are difficult to process. Like currently we are reading Ocean Wong's On Earth We Are Briefly Gorgeous. It's a gorgeous book, it's a beautiful book, but it also is a very very difficult read. It's not an easy read. It's so poetic. It's so dense, um, it's so emotional, it's so loaded. I don't know, I don't think I would have been able to read it on my own. I would have, I would have given up, because it's just so damn heavy. But it's so beautiful. Like, you don't want to deprive yourself of that experience of reading this beautiful book. How do you read it? And I think the only way, and this book club has been a blessing in disguise in that sense, because the only way I could have read something so beautiful and so dense was only through reading with people. If And some days you just don't feel like reading it, you just feel like, someone else. And most of our readers are just so beautiful orators. They just, open the book and they start reading, and it's like, being soothed by a voice. It's just a beautiful experience, unlike anything I have ever experienced. And I just hope I'm able to continue that for a very long time to come, till I get bored of it.
No, that's such a really nice way to put it, Nia. You know, the community aspect of reading, I think, is one of the joys of really reading is to meet like-minded people. And I think in many metros in India now, you know, with reading communities, with silent reading groups, I think
Yes.
people are moving more from being a solitary reader to, you know, building a community around it. And I think it really does enhance your experience, but also exposes you to difficult thoughts. You know, there may be books you can't read on your own, as you said, but with someone's prodding, you know, maybe someone saw something that'll be the right amount of motivation to pull through, you know. So
Yeah.
really beautifully put, Nia. You know, I feel like I can talk to you for hours and hours, and I think
Thank
one
you.
and a half hour is just not enough time to, you know, talk about the varied experiences, because I think there should be a podcast on each particular part, you know, your
Oh
life as a
God, no,
reader.
no, you are just flattering me. Thank you.
No, I genuinely believe this, you know, and I feel like the flow of the podcast was also very natural because it seemed like there's so much you had to share about these particular parts. So thank you for your podcast, Neha, you know, and, you know, your work as a brand strategist is someone that people can learn about through the internet professionally, reach out to you as well. So in the show notes for the listeners tuning in, I will be including links to all of Neha's profiles on the internet, and you can reach out to her on these different platforms. But to start off, I'd highly recommend Parenthood with Neha. It's one of my favorite
Thank you.
podcasts. And for the listeners tuning in, until next time, Neha, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Abhishek. Thank you for doing this. Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. And yeah, until next time, keep learning. Thank you.